Hello, good evening, and good morning to everybody as per the time zone you are in. Hello, Sanjeev, how are you?
Good, Snehal. Good to see you.
So, I think we'll
And
start now.
hello, everyone. Yeah.
We have quite a few participants here. So, just welcome everybody to this session of Architects Speaks. It's hosted by Architects of World. It's a career development portal for architects, and I'm Snehal Jagdale Surve, and I'll be with you in conversation with Sanjeev Vidyarthi, who has joined us all the way from Chicago. So today we are here to discuss about urban design as a career pathway. It's a very sought after career for architects. Uh, and we have the privilege of having with us Dr. Sanjeev Vidyarthi. And Sanjeev Vidyarthi, just to tell you in very brief, he has a long list of achievements, but I have to be a little brief because of our time constraints. So he's currently a professor of urban planning and policy, senior fellow of the Great Cities Institute, and a founder director of Masters in City Design program at University of Illinois Chicago. He has specialized in multi-layered experience of spatial planning for development of urban and suburban places. He has authored about 5 books and many articles for the academic journals. And to talk about his background, he is trained as architect, urban designer, and a spatial planner. And Sanjeev employs an integrative research approach to study the meaning and purpose of planning for places. So he has earned his professional degree of architecture from University of Mumbai or Bombay, and he then led a successful effort establishing Ayojan, a design leading firm of Rajasthan state, as well as state's first school of architecture in India. And after some time, he returned to graduate school again. He earned his master's of architecture from KU Leuven, Belgium, and another master's and PhD in urban planning from University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. His doctorate dissertation, exploring the travel of American neighborhood unit concept in post-independence India, has bagged recognition and awards, and it was awarded honorable mentions by Rackham Graduate School at the University of Michigan and the American Collegiate School of Planning as the best dissertation in international planning. And he's recently working on plan making and city design efforts in a wide variety of urban settings like planning neighborhoods, historic cities, and rapidly growing mega regions. So he works with progressive scholars and professional practitioners worldwide. So that's a big list of achievement, Sanjeev, there. And you have been, uh, practicing architect, academician, a research person, someone who is writing books, and somebody now being a director of the program. So now it's the right question. You are the correct person to ask with this wide experience. So as we are here today to talk about what is urban design, how do you define it, and we can start with a very basic question. As we progress, we'll go much deeper.
Yeah. Um, Thanks, Snehal. Um, for the kind, yeah, I would keep the introduction a little small. I wouldn't go over all that. But thank you. It was, you very nicely articulated some of the things I've been doing. Um, and I see, so I'm now on the speaker view on the grid uh, scale. So I can see many names on my screen.
Yeah.
And Snehal, most of the names I see are Indian names. So if you don't mind, I'll jump into Hindi sometimes. Feels very nice from Chicago, right? I mean, where I
Yeah.
have to speak. Yeah. मैं हिंदी में आपसे बीच बीच not everything, but because this would be recorded, and Snehal mentioned this, that this would be hosted on the website, and people which want in future. So English that way works, you know. But बीच बीच में, so ये जो सवाल है, this I think is very important, and I want to begin this conversation by first recognizing the effort Snehal and Milind are putting into this effort. This alternate angle is doing a fantastic job in making aware. This is what I miss. When I graduated out of JJ in early 90s, not many people sort of knew this. And Mumbai was the leading city even then. Uh, and I asked around, ये architecture क्या होता है, urban design क्या होता है, urban planning क्या होता है, how do they work together, क्या कहानी है. I went around and I talked to many people. It didn't, हर जने का एक समझाने का नजरिया था. But people explained it. Some people explained it from the perspective of their jobs. So, if, for example, if I ask this question, what is urban planning? जिसको हम इंडिया में टाउन प्लानिंग कहते हैं, हमारे अर्बन प्लानिंग नहीं होती, हमारे टाउन प्लानिंग. It's a British term that British stopped using after 1960s. So town and country planning, and different states have different names. In Rajasthan, for example, we call it town planning. Essentially a government, state-centered enterprise in India. हमारे यहाँ पर, 70s and 80s, this became very common. You guys were not born. And I was a baby then. I had to read about this and try to figure out. Right after Nehru's death, during Indira Gandhi times, sort of government took it upon itself that we would provide everything.
It was a very young country. So government took it on themselves to do it.
Yes, very young, sort of socialist. There was a very strong notion कि जो private लोग होते हैं वो पैसा excessive profit कमाते हैं. इस कारण the government can do this control means of production, right? That's the phrase they used. The state would control the means of production and be more equitable in its distribution. We know it didn't work out, right? I mean, finally there is a limit to the public sector and what public sector should be doing and not. So town planning उस level पे हो गई. Now, so I've gone around. I've tried to figure out the meaning of these disciplines, and I want to, I think that's a good question. So here's my understanding. So the focus of the architecture profession per se is at lot level, right? Architects design individual buildings, and campuses sometimes, right? Cluster of buildings, but it's a building. That's why, you guys are trained well in drawing floor plans, sections, elevations, right? The focus is on designing different kinds of buildings, usually starting from something as simple as a bookstore in the first semester to a complex 5-star hotel by the 8th or 9th semester, right? So we train you that way. That's architecture. What do engineers do? Engineers design the infrastructure between buildings, roads, pipelines, electricity lines, water lines, sewerage line, water disposal, right? Infrastructure in between buildings. And this system worked well for hundreds of years. Roman cities are a great example of this. Why? Because they were built using materials that have lasted, and the Europeans kept records. So we know during Roman times, the cities were laid out by architects, right? These are small places. These are not big cities. These are smaller towns. Let's call them towns. 30, 40,000 population usually. So architects and engineers, this combination worked for hundreds of years. The problem happened, and it was a big problem, with the advent of the industrial city. Starting from 19th century, suddenly there is an explosion of ideas. Capitalism, colonization, right? So, for example, city like Bombay did not exist before middle of the 19th century. Calcutta did not exist. Chennai did not exist. Karachi did not exist, right? It was a very different order. But once the colonists began to show up, the colonists, both at home, so London was a small village, New York was a small village. So these towns grow because industry shows up there. So on the back of industrialization, capitalism, global capitalism, exchange of trades, goods, commodities. Now, for this new kind of a city, which is suddenly very big, right, attracts many people. Mumbai's population, if you see, the graph is like this. It's only become a little slower in recent years because there's too much of a push. But so once this expansion happens, then you need a new kind of a profession that can sort of figure out what this city is, this new kind of a city, and how do we organize it. This is the time when planning in public domain starts. Planning in public domain. You can write down. इससे planning before this, city की planning कैसे, the city planning before this was mostly done by architects and working under a client, right? What architects love? Client.
Mm. Mm.
Even more than God at times.
Yeah.
Client is the God, right? I mean,
Yeah.
client is the one. First semester, so you start client, right? So the client was either a king, a very powerful person,
Yeah.
or the Pope, or the bishop, and still today, the reference for the client for an architect stems from that notion that they're usually very powerful people, because only they could afford to hire an architect, right?
Mm.
So there is this baggage that architects have to carry. And now this kind of planning, since democracy was developing, you could not do it behind doors.
Mm.
It's still, people argue that Mumbai's planning actually happens behind door. The CM and two people sit and make a plan and say FSI here, this massive,
Mhm.
right? And that has historically been the focus. But they said no, let's try do planning in the public domain.
Mm.
So a new profession emerged called urban planning. Now, what do urban planners do? First, urban planners study the complexity of these new kinds of cities, which are only 100, 150 years old.
Mm.
Mumbai is about only 150 years old. London,
Yeah.
same. New York, same. Paris, same. They started off as small villages. Mumbai, for example, a fisherman's.
Yeah.
London as a small trading community. But
Mm.
they've grown, and now they are mega cities of different, they are all 15, 20, 25 million people, huge numbers of people. So isko study karen, first thing. And the second thing is what planners do is to focus on the interaction effects between different urban systems. The cities comprise of many different systems, right? We know only few things about cities. Number one is that they are complex entities, entirely made by humans, and they comprise layers. Public transit is a layer, land use is a different layer, green recreational open spaces, employments, location of residential areas. Think of these as different layers. So planners study the interaction effect between different layers. What happens if we tweak the residential area here? Do we need more? What happens to the transportation? What kind of schools we need? So on and so forth. Urban designers, in contrast, right? So architects, individual buildings, civil engineers, infrastructure, planners, this interaction effect between urban systems, and urban designers or city designers focus upon intermediate urban spaces. So think public parks, think markets, think waterfronts, think riverfronts, right? Intermediate public places.
Mhm. Wow.
So, but that's sort of a conception. In real world, we want to keep this in mind. Cities are, there is a big notion that cities are for everyone.
Yeah.
Cities are for everyone. Why cities are for everyone? Because most of the humans, a majority of humans at this point in time in history live in cities. There are more people living in cities than rural areas, which has never happened before in human history. So, cities are actually designed by everyone. Everyone plays a role. The politicians play a role, real estate developers, neighborhood communities. As experts, there is importance, right? And I want to share a quick slide at this point.
Sure.
There is importance to the work we do as architects or urban designers or urban planners. But cities are designed by everyone, and we don't want to lose sight of this idea. So here is a little slide, and I think you can see it. It sort of shows the built environment at the center, right? So built environment is at the center. And you would see most of it is planned by non-architects and planners and designers. Those three are at the top. Well, there are many disciplines that sort of shape.
Yes.
Engineers of various kinds, designers of various kinds. Architects play an important role, definitely, concerned mainly with buildings and structures. And planners, right, play a major role with people and places, urban systems. And urban design, sort of city design, sort of sits between the two, but overlaps more with planning. Why does it overlap more with planning and not architecture? If you approach it from the architecture angle, then urban design sort of becomes like a big architectural project, right? Instead of designing 5 buildings, we design 20 buildings and we call it urban design. No, the urban piece is important. Cities are complex. So what Snehal was saying, paying attention to the social, economic, political, cultural aspects, and how these interact with other urban systems is important. Architects lack that knowledge.
Yeah, so during architecture, we are just concerned about pleasing maybe few users and a client who is, asking us. But over here, we are in public domain.
Yeah,
We have to pay attention to even the smallest to the largest. All
yeah,
spectrum of people and
yeah,
all social aspects.
yeah,
Correct.
yeah, yeah. The patron thing can help a little bit, but now architects have to step away from that. So
Yeah,
urban design sort of overlaps more with urban planning that way.
yeah.
And that's, so this mapping of the professions, that's what I call it.
Mm.
These are design oriented professions that shape the built environment. If you map them, there are overlaps, right? And in the real world, if you are an architect, you can do planning work and you can also do urban design work, right? I mean
Yeah,
what's stopping?
yeah.
No, yeah. Or a non-architect or a non-planner actually does more work, right? The chief minister of Maharashtra perhaps is the most important planner and architect, because, or the minister of urban development housing, or the secretary, who are non-architects, but they still bring that. You see what I'm saying? And
Yeah.
then,
So
yeah,
besides just technical people, we are dealing with
yeah,
bureaucrats. We are
yeah,
dealing with policymakers and
yeah, yeah.
ministers and
Yes,
whole
and
lot of
that is the
stuff.
sign of a democratic, healthy, democratic society we live in, right?
Yeah.
Everyone should participate.
So how is the everybody is now involved, like what you're talking about, everybody is involved in planning process in this process. So urban designer as how that person is contributing to all this exercises which are going on.
Hmm. No, that's a good question. Now, I want to put this before I tackle Snehal's question head on. I want to, provide a little background to this, in the sense that, um, so the profession of architecture can be, we can sort of track it
Mm,
back to the, I mean, Vastu Shastras, right?
mm, mm,
The Shastras on Vastu essentially means someone was paying attention to designing of buildings and planning of
mm,
places. They go back to about 8th century AD, 6th century
mm,
AD.
mhm,
The book of Vitruvius
mm.
goes to about 1200 AD. So we can safely say architecture as a profession is, in an organized manner, is at least 1,000, 1,200, 15 years old.
Yeah.
Um, Engineering is about 1,000 years old. Roman
Mm, mm,
viaducts and
mhm.
aqueducts are sort of great examples of solid civil engineering. Um, Urban planning is about 120 years old,
Yes.
and
It is
urban
a
design is like
it is
60
a
years.
growing baby right now.
It's a
It-
baby,
yeah.
when you compare it with that.
Yeah.
When someone is 1,200 years old and you are 60 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah. Think of the age difference. So it's a baby profession, but it is growing in importance. If 30 years ago we were talking about it, and uh, you realize this, numbers are important. So, for example, just to put that into perspective, in India today, when I registered with Council of Architecture, my number was, and this would have been 91, 92, so almost 28, 29, 30 years ago, my
Mm.
COA registration number was about 15,000, about. Snail, what is your number?
It comes with a year of graduation. So
Oh.
they put a year and then the number. So
Yeah, so what's
I
your number?
yeah, so it is like, it is
Do you
crossing
recall
into
your
many
number?
digits now. So that's why they've,
6 digits. Yeah, that's
yeah,
my
they
sense.
are coming up with the system of, putting
Yeah.
the
My
graduation
sense
year.
is we are now about 1.5 lakh architects, or
Yeah.
150,000 architects in the
Yes.
country. So people who have registered recently can corroborate this. I was 15,000. So now,
Mm.
so 1.5 still less for a country of 1.4 billion people, still
Mhm.
less.
Yeah.
Someone wants to take a guess how many planners, urban planners, qualified, registered like architects in this country? About 5,000. So 5,000 urban planners for a country of 1.4 billion people. The urban population is about 500 million people. Can you imagine this? What about
Very less.
if so one 0.5 lakh architects, 5,000 city planners. So how many urban designers?
Oh,
100,
less than that.
200,
Yeah.
500, 300, So, yeah, no. At this point in time, but the good news is India's prosperity increasingly sort of is seen as closely related with cities. So there
Hmm.
is a lot of attention that the
Hmm.
government, the
Yeah.
state, everyone is paying to cities. When you guys live in cities, you realize Indian cities are not the easiest places to live in, very hard places to live
Hmm.
in. Air quality, water quality, transportation quality, quality of public realm. We have architecture profession has been very successful in India. There's no doubt in my mind about it. We design world-class buildings. So at the lot level, we have mastered the craft. Look at five-star quality of design in five-star hotels, schools, train stations, bus stations. Architecture, I argue, has succeeded phenomenally in India in terms of individual building. You cannot, right? I mean, you step out of any site, you step out of Taj Mumbai, and what do you see, right? Within the site, जो architect ने line लगाई थी on the drawing board, we have excelled. Outside of that, we have failed. And that's why we need better quality city design and better quality city planning. That's the argument I make to my Indian friends.
Okay. So basically, urban designers are bringing in a more of a aesthetic sense to public spaces, a more quality of spaces. Uh, that's what they're contributing.
That's a good way to frame it, Snehal. My sense is they first of all they're paying attention to that aspect of cities that no one else is paying attention to. For example, if you have seen the work that has happened in Connaught Place, the redevelopment of Connaught Place, or
Hmm.
the work that has happened around Golden Temple in Amritsar, or the work that happened through Rahul Mehrotra's office and uh, in Mumbai, in South Mumbai, on redevelopment of urban areas. This is, Bernard Pier. You remember
Hmm.
the heritage walk and
Yeah.
all that redevelopment. So it's first they're paying attention to this intermediate urban scale. Remember, architecture works at 1:100 scale on the plot level.
Hmm.
Now, as soon as we say urban designing, we're saying 1:500 scale at the neighborhood level.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
Say, I think that's one way architects get it very clear.
Yeah.
The third one is when we say urban planning, then we saying 1:2000 scale.
2000.
We are saying Western Bombay, right? That's the
Yeah.
scale. And when I'm saying metropolitan regional planning, then I'm saying 1:20,000 Brun Mumbai, right? The entire region, stretching from almost until Pune, if you think that way. So Mumbai region is 1:20,000 scale. So these scales, and if I'm saying interior designing, then I'm saying 1:20,
Yeah.
below the
Eh,
architecture. So that's the scale we want to be thinking. So first, they're paying attention to this scale. Second, they do work which sort of brings together, which creates lively places.
Yeah.
And that's every one of us has seen good urban lively places.
Yeah.
And we have equally seen terrible urban places, right? And that's the rationale for urban design right there. We don't need more support for that and nor less.
Okay.
You've seen good urban place? Yeah, that's what urban design is.
Atanu Das is asking a question. Could you think Vastu Shastra is a scientifically and using without in accordance with architecture? So, in terms of urban design planning, is Vastu Shastra also talks about some of the aspects of planning, right?
Vastu Shastra is scientifically and using without in accordance with. Yeah, I mean, that's someone wrote those books and they were paying attention to, how the city should be organized. So definitely there is a normative basis to thinking in the Vastu Shastras. But recall this, cities um, um, in architecture, you guys learn this and you practice this a lot. And I think that's fundamental to the way we should be thinking about design is what is the purpose of design? The cause, what's the cause of design, right? Why am I doing this? And second, context of design.
Hmm.
Yeah, what's the context? always want to pay attention to the context. So Vastu paid attention to the context of that time,
Hmm.
and that context has changed dramatically.
Hmm. Hmm.
So,
Correct.
why can't, yeah, you can design a new city based on Vastu, but you would realize it would not work. Why it would not work? Because the context has changed. That city could have worked in that time. Why not? Absolutely. There was a thinking that went into that spatial organization. If you see, Vastu Shastra sort of lays out these principles and these ideas. Fantastic. Applicable for the time. Today, it's a very different context.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think our social makeup has changed from that point. Our economies have changed. We have to consider a lot of environmental aspect. Like that time, the land was freely available,
Yes.
and a lot of these aspects have come in. And unfortunately, nobody developed Vastu Shastra in all these aspects to match the modern needs. So
Yeah.
if any of you guys want to do it as your thesis or something later on, it's an open topic.
It's a good topic.
So we also think about, urban design changes from places to places. So we have to consider about historic character or the character of that city or the areas that you're designing, right? So you have also written about some places where you have thought about users' perspective or requirements of people in that area uh, that we have to address as urban designers, correct?
Yeah. This is Snehal raises an important point that we were talking about just now. You know, the cause and context. That's how I sort of think of it.
Hmm.
Cause का मतलब क्या है? Cause का मतलब है I'm doing it because of this, right? The cause of this is
Hmm.
the purpose. We never do any work without purpose.
Hmm.
If you were designing an architectural project, you're doing it because the purpose is you've been commissioned by a client and you're going to get paid for the task, right? That's the cause that's causing you to design that. Similarly, the first thing you want to ask, why this urban design project, right? For example, you find a project or someone asks you to design a project like the upgradation of linking road between SV Road and Bandra Sea Stand, right?
Yeah,
Bandstand.
yeah,
Between
quite a large
Bandstand and
area.
SV
Yeah,
Road, yeah,
yeah.
that's a project. Why am I doing it? And then that's the question when you begin asking, why am I doing improve the quality of public realm, talk to people, this is very lively. Many people depend on it for their jobs and occupation, right? There
Mhm.
is, and streets have a beautiful sense. They're very dynamic places. West Metro streets are not that good. But in Asian streets, full of liveliness, there is a life, there is a flow. Now, how do I do this? And then you get into all sort of questions. So then you have to talk to all these people who sort of are engaged with this. Otherwise, आपका design fail हो जाएगा.
Hmm.
You cannot in an interior design project you can do whatever you want because there is one client. In an urban design project, there are many clients, and this is important. There are some. I'll again sort of evoke Rahul Mehrotra on this. Rahul sort of talks about this notion that there are user clients, there are patron clients, there are clients who put in money, but there
Yeah,
are clients who actually would. You see what I'm saying? So
yeah,
you need to pay different kind. There's a
yeah,
complexity of clients, and that's what make urban design and city planning work, to my mind, much more interesting. Much more
yeah.
interesting. I was successful. My practice of architecture was very successful, but I was increasingly drawn towards this complexity
Hmm.
of communities. Humans sort of do interesting stuff when we stuck together as communities,
Hmm.
and especially place-based communities. Place-based communities have a very interesting sort of dynamic, and that is the palette. Okay, I think it took a bit of time, but everyone got it. I hope.
Yeah, I think we have quite elaborately discussed about what is urban design and its various scopes. So now, if a person is interested into being an urban designer, what does it take? Like what qualities or what does it take to be an urban designer?
Excellent question, Snail. I think the first one is just as in architecture, architecture mein aapko, they all, right from year one, architecture or landscape architecture or urban studies, any um, undergraduate class or course that focuses on urban stuff, they alert you ki bhai, be observant, pay attention to the context, right? Sketch things. So my sense is, I want to show you a slide. I think, if someone in India wants to be an urban designer, you first want to pay attention to the context of the country. Ki kya ho raha hai. I find this a fascinating visualization. And what stands out here, I mean, I don't, this, since this is not a big lecture, we just talking about it. And Muhammad Qadir was a professor of urban planning in Canada. He wrote an article in 1980s. So that article itself is now almost 40 years, 35 years ago, where he described how from Calcutta, right? So you see
Mm.
Kolkata here, and
Yeah.
Lahore is
Ah.
here, was
Uh-huh.
a continuous city. In 1980s, he argued that from Kolkata to Lahore was a single
Oh.
city. And now you see it, you know, um,
Yeah.
it's a single city. There's
Yeah.
not, this is not, these are not different cities. Now, why, how do we visualize this space? If you look it through the political map, you could say, no, these are 6 different states, which is true.
Yeah.
And each state has a chief minister, and chief minister is the grand booba of that state. Nothing can happen in that state unless the CM is on board, and which is true. And then there are hundreds of cities, and each
Mm.
city has its, municipal boundary and urban area boundary,
Mhm.
and so on, right? So there are hundreds of political jurisdictions from here to here.
Mhm.
There is even an international border, right? I'm sure you might cross, you don't cross Bangladesh that much, but you cross an international border into Lahore. And from
Yeah.
Lahore to Peshawar, it is again one city, right?
Yeah.
So this is GT Road in other ways, right? I mean, think GT Road,
Yeah.
Calcutta to Peshawar,
Yeah.
and it's a continuous urban conurbation.
Yeah.
Environmentally, it's one single place. The smog, as it affects North India, it does not stop at the Wagah border and says, here's my
Yeah.
visa, here's my passport. That goes right through, right? So environmentally, we know it's one. Ecological, this is one single watershed of river Ganges. That's another way to visualize it.
Uh-huh.
So first, start visualizing the complexity of it. That's the first thing you can do. Just as in architecture, we observe the anthropometric data. Remember? Why the door is so wide, it's so tall, why the toilet you need this much space. And similarly, start thinking, same thinking. So I found this, Snehal, is very useful, that my architectural training and our
Yeah.
architectural background helps a lot.
Yes.
Visualization skills help a lot. But the first thing is to start thinking about the complexity of urbanity. And then you start thinking, ki yaar, agar yahan Calcutta, from Calcutta to Lahore, if it is one city, and at some point in time, this would have to be organized. Yeah. Most of this has grown unplanned. Why did it grow? Because there's so many people who live. This is one of the world's most populous area.
Yeah.
It's like 600-700, and that's what so you see it compared to rest of India.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you
The most
realize it's like
populous.
500
Yeah.
600 million people that live between Calcutta.
I think it's a great graph. Great graph. It's a great graph.
Yeah.
And you can see the cultural, as you travel along, you can see the cultural similarities and little variation that occurs as you
Yeah.
travel.
Yeah.
In terms
So
of
someone has to, at
Yeah.
some point in time, Snail, this would have to be planned
Yeah.
at that intermediate scale.
Yeah.
I would reiterate, we don't have to worry about the individual plot scale. I think Indian architects have mastered how
Yeah.
to design world-class buildings, schools, hospitals, shopping centers, villas, apartment buildings, fantastic projects. It's
Yes.
the next, right?
Yeah.
Now
So
we
now
have
we have to come out of our step out of our plots
Yeah,
and think a little bigger
that's right.
of how my city is going to look pretty,
There
or
you go.
how can I make it unique, and how can I
There
make
you,
it have its own identity as such.
and that conversation has started. The good news is that
Hmm.
conversation has started within the architecture community.
Hmm.
That conversation is started at the policy level,
Hmm.
at the politicians level,
Hmm.
at the state bureaucrats level. So there is a general public support for what urban planners and urban designers can do meaningful.
So
Since their number is so small,
Yeah.
What is 5,000 planners in a country of 1.4 billion? Very few. So architects have to step up. Can architects do it by themselves? No, they need specialized training. Architects by themselves can, as I told you, and people who are in that world understand this. First thing is that boundary, and then the client, right? These two, and then we are done. Because our training does not, and trainings are at different scales. So this kind of training about urban, whether planning angle or design angle, I think is vital both for the country and for young people who want to make a purposeful change. Uh, you know,
So
many
you
people
just
want to make a purposeful change. Uh,
you
and
just
this is sort of,
mentioned that the change is happening, that
yeah,
people who are
yeah.
so as once a student completes urban designing courses, so where are the opportunities for them to work?
Good question. I think of uh, uh, urban design as a field which is very closely tied to design and planning firms.
Hmm. Hmm.
So most people go work for large scale planning and design firms.
Okay.
Um, and those firms are, think of those as multinational firms, like,
Hmm.
and there are many of them, Gensler, these are large scale firms. These are
Hmm.
the firms that do for example, the Mumbai airport,
Yeah.
uh, yeah, the Delhi airport, that kind of work. So that's one. Oh, even in India, there are several firms that work in that space. So that's one. I
Hmm.
think of that as almost like corporate level planning and design firms.
Hmm. Hmm.
Then the second is more intermediate level firms that are more national in nature,
Hmm.
or more even regionally based in nature. Now, this
Hmm.
kind of work with, now there is government money coming in with, for example, smart cities,
Hmm.
um, and why. So Delhi historically always took money from cities. Delhi never gave no money to any city. Delhi gave nothing to no one. Delhi always took money. What's more important is there is money coming in for city planning. So each
Yeah.
city got good amounts of money to do some meaningful work. So there is all of that debate happening. But there is money, there is willingness, there is this space, and Indians living in cities want to live in better places.
Yeah. What is the, like, we talked about a lot about India and development. So what is happening across the world in this field in urban design? A lot of new concepts and new researches is
Yeah,
being done. So can you
yeah,
highlight a little bit on that?
sure. That's a good question, Snail. Um, a big shift that has happened, so urban design, as I said, it's a continuously growing field.
Hmm.
New, starting from a
Hmm.
small base, only 1960s, so we 50-60 saal hue. Uh, but some of the new ideas people have sort of begun to work with is appropriate kind of cities. Now there's a very strong recognition that um, only Western models cannot work. No.
Hmm.
So we have to sort of contextualize knowledge.
Hmm.
There is a talk about planning in global South, that
Hmm.
Mumbai needs its own plan. And there is no doubt in my mind that that's entirely true.
Hmm.
Bandra ka plan cannot be same as New Bombay plan, and New Bombay plan should not be same as the plan for Kolhapur, and that should not be the same plan for Raipur. So now there is, so that's one. I think of that kind of work as contextualizing the practice. That's a big one. Um, the second one is sort of working with newer systems. For example, um, some of these ideas about organizing more sustainable, more green, more dense, more pedestrian oriented places. That's a
Hmm.
big one.
Hmm.
Ecological urban design is another big area emerging,
Hmm.
where we realize for each age. That's one
Hmm.
way I think to think about it. uh, हर समय काल की कुछ अपनी requirements होती हैं. Each
Hmm.
time has a
Hmm. Hmm.
different requirement.
Yes.
Our times, the current times we live in, there are two that are major. Number one is social equity.
Hmm.
The idea of social equity is what we were just talking about. Everyone deserves a good place. Everyone deserves good education, healthcare, clean place to live in, social equity. समाज में सबको बराबर का हक मिले. Number one. Number two is environmental quality, right? With climate change happening, and especially cities like Mumbai that are right on the coast, and many other cities. Most human beings and largest cities are along coasts, right? I mean, historically, because sea trade and trading was a big part of this. So climate change we have to face. So these two, social and environmental, those are the two guideposts to my mind for all architecture, planning, and design work going forward. And that's been going on for the last 15, 20 years at some level. So designers are paying attention to this, Nehal. That's a new kind of design, you know. Just imagine, yeah, pura making the entire neighborhood green.
Yeah.
It's very exciting and interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So earlier there were some, this new urbanism and all these philosophies came in very early on. That was like kind of a birth of urban design field. And today that time it was the need because it was, this congested, polluted cities and a lot of space available. And now we are trying to re-densify or in a new way our own cities, and we are trying to carve out spaces which are more inclusive of socially more inclusive, giving more quality of spaces to the urban dwellers. Not they don't have to go very far away. So these are the, I think, what you talked about, like, new emerging areas. We are trying to, whatever we have, we are trying to develop it in a proper way and give a more quality space to our residents. You are running this program of Master in City Development, City Design. So how are you, provoking your students to go into this direction, or what are you doing in this program, which is very exciting for the students who are looking at this program or looking at urban design as a field?
Yeah, good questions. Yeah, I'll show the slides in a
Yeah.
minute. But this is the city of Chicago, the downtown, and this is sort of this is a shot of that downtown from UIC campus. This is in fact the conference room of the student center on the UIC campus, and that's how you see the city from the student center.
Wow.
But if and that's the Lake Michigan. So UIC UIC was founded as an urban university, public urban research university. So the focus of this university by itself is on urban research. And we have had this Master of Urban Planning and Policy program, MUP, which is a professional planning degree in the professional graduate degree in the planning field, which is for 45 years we have had that. Very successful, and one of the largest planning programs in North America, attracts students from everywhere. Now, within that MUP curriculum, it was difficult to teach urban design. We had a subject, but and a constant area of concentration. But since MUP students come from a variety of backgrounds, very difficult to teach design within that MUP curriculum. So that was one reason to carve that knowledge field outside and create a new master which focuses on urban design. That was one. The second was that there is perhaps no better place, very few places that come close to Chicago when it comes to this tradition of urban design and urban planning. So think from Burnham Plan in 1908 to this lakefront that Chicago has, the kind of projects that have our UIC's location. And then we attract students from all over the world. And our faculty, so this is the faculty at UIC. These are my colleagues. And they come from 11 countries. I'll read a few of them by just looking at faces. We have someone from Canada, we have someone from Argentina, Colombia, Syria, China, India, Turkey, Serbia, Ethiopia, right? And then we have people from many different states. I can see New York, I can see Wisconsin, I can see Michigan, I can see New Mexico, I can see Indiana, right? So it's an incredibly diverse collective of people
Yeah, so
These
they
are
come
all
up
full.
with their own perspective about things,
Yeah,
and it is
and these
integrated,
are all.
and the solutions are also varied that way.
That's right. So it's such a rich collective of people,
Ah,
and then our location, right? I mean, forget. And all the world's largest planning and design firms, as we were talking about, are headquartered in Chicago. SOM is headquartered here, HOK. So we are able to engage with them. For example, this is a slide that shows some of the works we are able to do. The first slide here on the left corner, where you see a bunch of people
mm,
standing in the. This is the MCD class out with the instructor, Dr. Yildiz.
mm,
Dr. Shivan Yildiz, who is a prominent scholar of Istanbul and New
mm,
York, and they are out on a study, walking trip
mm.
through looking, I think, at the Chicago riverfront. Uh,
Okay.
yeah, and then the next image here of a big talk is there is always, because Chicago has all these people that we invite them for studio interactions and
Mm,
for college talks every. So this is Phil Enquist, and that the Phil Enquist of SOM, and I'm talking. This is a conversation that we are having, and Rahul Mehrotra, who is
mm.
visiting us from Harvard.
Yeah.
Or Mumbai, one of the two places. And then this one, someone might recognize this. This on the left-hand side is the Fransworth House, the famous Mies van
Ah.
der Rohe
Oh
Fransworth
yeah.
House. Yeah, on
Yeah.
Plano.
We have seen the sketches in the books. Yeah.
Yeah. So we are out visiting, so you can see Dr. Yildiz and myself along with uh, MCD students. We are out in Plano, Illinois, and this is a dedicated studio
Mm.
uh, where they are having, so behind this computer screen is, I think, either Bob Fishman from Michigan or Phil Enquist, who's talking to the students. We've just finished the review, so you can see the
Okay.
drawings at the back.
Yeah.
And now this is a group discussion. So this is it's a dedicated space. Chicago's location, our access, and since we are UIC's urban planning program, as I said, is almost now half a century old.
Mm.
Our alumni, staff, you cannot go any public or private design office in Chicago without meeting someone who's a graduate of our program at UIC. So, with all
Yeah.
these linkages, we are able to invite the brightest and the smartest people for studio reviews, juries, talks. So it's a very enriching kind of an environment. And then the access to the city itself, it sort of serves as our learning laboratory, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
so urban design is actually a very hands-on program. It
yeah,
it is not just sitting in a classroom and listening to
yeah,
lectures. It's
yeah.
you
Go
have to
out
go
to the
out,
city.
experience
Yeah,
spaces, collect data. Sometimes they send you for surveys and things like that,
yes,
and you.
yeah,
So it's very interesting to be in urban design studios, and then you interact with all these people with different ideas, and they come up with their own backgrounds, and you collaborate with them, and you kind of exchange ideas, and you have very different exposure. So I think urban design, even I have done urban design, so that's why I could say that it's very interesting to do, and it's very fulfilling, especially for architects who come from design background and who are interested in design, basically, who are interested to do something on larger scale. This is a fantastic field to take and to pursue. So I think I'm done with whatever I wanted to talk to Sanjeev Vidyarthi about. So it's now your turn. Yeah. So
okay,
Vidhi, yeah, we should take Vidhi's question that she's
yes.
waiting for some time.
So yeah, everyone, I'll repeat this question or say it aloud so everyone gets it. Vidhi is asking, what's the difference between urban planning and urban design? Mm, we talked about urban planners focus on more policy side and these interaction effects between urban system, relationship between land use and public transit, for example, relationship between job locations and residential areas. अगर जॉब और लोकेशन पास पास होंगे जहां पर जॉब सिचुएटेड है और जहां पर रेजिडेंशियल एरियाज हैं, then your cities work more efficiently, things like that. Urban designers as we said, focus on design, not policy, but more design, actual physical design of intermediate scale places. Uh, so, in even simpler terms, if you are interested more in policy, less in design, urban planning might be more a better fit for you. If you're interested more in design, doing things in a meaningful way, in a manner that sort of fits that intermediate scale, then urban design is the field to think of. Um, you know, that's the way I would think. Uh, a big difference is from the perspective of Indian students, and this is a personal opinion, but I stand by it. Um, uh, my sense is we train Indian architecture schools train you well in designing buildings, right? And I talked about first semester to eighth semester. Um, and they teach you well how to visualize. They teach you well how to draw. It's solid when it comes to basics, that you got your working drawings down, you got your design skills down, you got your visualization skills down. So if you're thinking of doing a MArch abroad, it's not a good idea. If you've done your BRs from India, do not do a MArch from abroad, because whatever you needed to learn about design, you've been taught in BRs, and you find with this. You would not doing 3 additional studios. What does it get you? Not really much. Urban planning, if you are interested in policy side, if policy side interacts you, then I think but it's 2 years duration. The Master of Urban Design is 1 year. MArch is 3 years. Master of Urban Planning is 2 years. MArch is 1 year. And MArch is an extension of what you already know, right? You know your BR stuff, it extends onto urban scale. I think that's a very cool fit. You learn something new. So 1 year you save tons of money, and you are able to get that exposure within cool urban environment like that of Chicago or London or New York, right? There are very few places to do urban design in my mind. First, you need a city, right? if I want to do city planning or city design, first I need a city. I want to do it perhaps in Mumbai or Singapore or Shanghai or Chicago or London, right? A real city that works, that functions, that has all these ideas. So for Indian architecture students, I strongly advocate a Master of Urban Design over an MArch. MArch, I don't think it's a cool idea. No, then there is Shailesh's question. What is your take on generative design approach? It's an emergent area, Shailesh, but I like the fact that you are thinking already upscaling your effort, where you are focusing on simulation and multi-objective optimization on building and scaling it up to a larger scale. I think that's a very fruitful way to explore some of your ideas in future. With these question, what skills, technical and software? I think software wise, you guys learned quite well. I would think of Adobe Creative Suite, Autodesk, CAD kinds of software, and some GIS. GIS you would usually learn when you are in graduate school. So, don't worry about that too much. Sketching, photography, basic drawing visualization skills. But thinking about urban, you want to showcase. One thing that students do with their portfolios when they're showcasing their stuff is that, many people arrange it chronologically, first semester to 10th semester, right? First semester I did this, second semester, third. No, I'm not interested, I want to see the development of your design thinking. How did your thinking about design has evolved a period of time, right? You become more interested in urban stuff, or you become more interested in climatological stuff, more interest, and then show that progression of your work in that particular area of work, right? So, and you can organize your portfolio skill-wise, handmade sketch, computer-generated sketch, photography, nature photography, portrait, different ways to organize a portfolio, and use that portfolio to showcase your strength and evolution of your design thinking, rather than showing first semester, second semester, third semester, fourth. No. Yeah.
So I think one more question that is coming in. What is the scope of job post urban design courses in India and abroad?
I think Vidhi, it's no, that's a good question, and I'm glad you're asking this. I think it is good both places. You know, and why do I say this? Why is this a good? Uh, skill wise. So one is the idea of knowledges, right? And that's what Snail and I would sort of focus more on. And then there is this idea of skill set. Um, I think urban designers, trained urban designers, well-trained urban designers are better placed than both architects and planners in terms of the job market because they bring a unique set of skills. They bring design knowledges and planning knowledges together, right? Planners can design, architects cannot plan, urban designers can do both. So
Mm.
firms like to hire them. I mean, it's a so more chances that way. But it's hands-on work and it's design-oriented planning work, and that's the way to think of it. So, but if three people are applying for the same position, and one is an architect with an MArch, similar backgrounds, let's say educationally, one is an architect with a Master of Urban Design, City Design degree, and the third one is a Master of Urban Planner. I'll put my $20 on the urban designer getting that job, not the architect, nor the planner, because the market demands that kind of a skill. You know, architects are easy to find in today's employment place, both in India and abroad. Planners also relatively easy to find abroad, less in India. But urban designers are are scarce. There are not too many well trained. So if you targeting that kind of work, absolutely, there is a good demand in the market.
So I'll add to it because now,
Yeah.
because the scale of projects is getting bigger, so we are moving from single building or single complex design to a very large scale design. So where more than architects, urban designers are contributing. And if you see planning, we are just not writing reports; we are actually executing them. So for execution purpose, the design comes into picture. You can plan that this will turn into this kind of space, but until you show them something, nobody realizes what a planner is talking about. So urban designers are helping visualizing that spaces, putting a picture in front of the stakeholders, and whatever policies or thinking that the planners are having, they are able to portray it, and they're able to showcase it. So they are in demand in both fields, so architecture as well as planning. So your spectrum is much bigger if you have done urban design, from planning to architecture, so you can see yourself in any of the space in between.
Yes, that's a good way.
Yeah.
But I'm glad we had a good conversation,
Yeah.
and we fielded a bunch of questions, and now I think this was very fruitful. Thanks
Yeah, yeah.
for
So
organizing.
yeah, I think it was great, and it was great talking to you, and it was great that some of the people are actively asking questions. And if you have like any more questions, you can email us, and we can forward it to Dr. Vidyarthi, and we can get it answered for you.
Sure.
So with that, I think it's time that we
Yes,
close the session. And thank you
absolutely.
very much for your time. It was very insightful. It was a good discussion. Really enjoyed it. And thank you for spending so much time with us.
Thank you, Snehal. Thank you, everyone.